But eventually, your biology starts to help you. Because once you're more sensitive, you will be guided towards better decisions. If you're addict to sugar, breaking that habit is hard first. But eventually, you actually don't really feel like to have that much sweets either. Like I just went through 8 weeks of ketogenic diet myself. Every year I do that for about 6 to 8 weeks. And right now, the concept of a cake literally makes me gag. Now, normally I do like eat sweets time to time, but not after having such a ketogenic protocol. So I feel very good in my body right now. It fits my system. So what I'm trying to say, once you do your job, your biology is going to help you too.
I'm Todd Vande, CEO of Stark, and I've gone from vegan to paleo to keto to carnivore, from cryosaunas to ice baths, to training like an athlete, to being injured like one, enhancing my mobility, enhancing my sex hormones. With thousands of labs and various forms of scans, I'm surrounded by high-level medical doctors, naturopathic medical doctors, chiropractors, nutritionists, and strength coaches, all leading me in concert to a state of optimal health. And I'm here to share that with you regardless of your age, your genes, or your medical conditions. Today's guest is Csaba Lucas. He's a world-renowned coach, author, speaker, and entrepreneur who blends ancient wisdom with modern science to help people unlock their deepest potential. Born in Hungary and raised through intense physical training as a competitive athlete, Csaba has advised Olympic athletes, Fortune 500 executives, and special forces operators. He's the founder of Coach Barefoot and author of Barefoot Soul, which explores how living simply and moving with intention can change your brain, your body, and your life. He's also the creator of the Persistence Barefoot Running Method and a deeply introspective guide to what it means to be human. He is a fascinating one. I'm so excited to share my podcast with you with Csaba. How'd you get here from Hungary?
I won a scholarship to teach children art and health-related subjects when I was 19. That's how I left Eastern Europe and moved to Canada.
19.
I was 19. Yeah, I was very fortunate. I already had my business degree. I went to high school and university at the same time. And I grew up in Eastern Europe before the regime changing. So the regime changing, before Eastern Europe became also democratic capitalist, so I grew up in socialism.
Still exists when you were...
Yeah. I'm extremely old.
Okay.
I think we have the same coloring.
We have the same...
So yeah. So you understand what I mean?
I feel you.
Yeah. So I grew up in a socialist country, which I didn't think much of it, obviously, growing up. But imagine that there are no private ventures, no taxes, no debit cards, bank accounts. None of those things existed. Not just that it wasn't in my life, but I didn't know anyone who had that in their lives, right? So imagine that. So once capitalism was coming in the form of, regime changing in the region, all my friends were talking about business. Everyone was trying to do business. And I was like, what the heck is business? So I was like, maybe I should study that. And I was a very good student. I went to an incredible high school. And I was like, okay, let's just study this in university. And I was a good enough student to be able to go to university simultaneously. And
while you were in high school?
Yeah. And after about the second microeconomics class, I realized that it was the most boring thing that humans ever developed. I was like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into?
Economics was boring?
The whole, everything. Like, no. Economics, like in the business university program I got engaged with. But I was a pretty greedy guy, so I still got my degree, but I never thought I would ever use it in my life, because I was into sports. Mostly, let's see what you can do with your biology as a human being. So I pushed myself. I was a BMX champion in my town.
BMX?
BMX, yeah. Back in the 80s.
Like rolls and...
Well, it's, keep in mind, this was the early 80s. So that means BMX was a very different concept in the world as of now. And Eastern Europe, it was even another layered difference. So we used BMX and those type of bikes in an obstacle course competition with bikes, which is, I don't even know how to describe it, what it was. But anyway, so that's what I've succeeded in quite a bit within my city, And then I went into many other sports. I was a discus, javelin, shot put, 800-meter champion in my county. I was the third in the national championship in canoeing in Hungary. And Hungary is one of the world's leading countries when it comes to canoeing. So it actually means something. Here in America, you say canoeing, everyone's like, what do you mean canoeing?
Yeah.
So it's basically when you're kneeling and you're paddling on one side and the boat goes straight, right? That type of thing. And then
Races.
a race. Yeah. I mean, I was, highly up there as a young person, not in the adult championship, but in the youth championship, like, ages. Basically, I started when I was 8. Okay, now this might be interesting because for the sake of our conversation, right? Sports science is something that's very important to you guys. The way how I got connected to sports science is that, I don't know how much you know about this, but most of the sports science is actually originated from the ex-Soviet systems.
Yes, I'm very familiar
right?
with that. Yeah.
Verkhoshansky, all of these guys.
Kettlebells.
It's like pretty much everything. The importance of that really stemmed from there. And I was just very fortunate that I grew up in an environment that fully intertwined that system into everything to do with human physiology, i.e. in the school, how we were trained, in the PT, and then how you practice sports. So if you just simply Google most effective countries per population, bringing out the most diverse high-level athletes in the world, you will see all of the ex-Eastern European countries, Hungary, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, all of these countries, very small, tiny population, yet the level of medals that they get in the Olympics is really outlier. And the reason why they're outlier, because they're very good at creating amazing athletes. So I literally grew up in that system. So when I went to first grade, the way how the system worked over there, that coaches from different sports came into the elementary school and they pitched to students their sport. So my canoe coach came in when I was literally first grade. It's like
First grade.
I'm a coach of canoeing. What we do, we have nice, cool boats. Do you guys want to come and check it out? And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. Why not? So I went and I started to train there. And in Eastern Europe, keep in mind, when you got into this type of thing, I had about 13 training sessions every week from then on,
13 training sessions
per week.
Like 2-a-days.
Yeah. So that was the norm. So it didn't matter if you were canoeing, you were in gymnastics, you were in, soccer, whatever. The system itself put giant amount of demand on your physiology, but not in a specialist way. So out of the 13 training sessions, that doesn't mean I was canoeing 13 times. That means I had gymnastics, weightlifting, like early on, short sprinting, long distance running, handball, basketball, soccer, every type of different sports you can imagine was intertwined into the system.
Everybody went through that?
Everyone was going through this. It doesn't matter what type of sports you were in. The ratio changed a little bit, but that was the overarching system, the non-specialized system. And really, if you look at sports science, being very effective as an athlete when you grow up, there are two components to it. One of them, you can go in a specialist way. This is what America excels in. Excels meaning this is what they do. Which is you try to identify early on, what the sport one would like to go into, which is usually what the parents want you to go into. And then they start pushing that sport, let it be baseball, soccer, whatever. And then everyone is going crazy on pushing that direction. As opposed to, let's say, in a ex-Eastern Bloc country, you had a main sport that you liked, but you went into it, but the system, the coaches, they force you to do all other type of activities, which basically did the following. Let's say at age of 12, 13, in Eastern Europe in this system, you were subpar athlete comparison to someone who went into a specialized way from the age of 6, right? But you had a much more robust nervous system. Because your nervous system, right, it needs many different type of stimuli as opposed to a very specialized stimuli. So by 12, 13, let's say a soccer player who grown up in this very specialized system, they will be better, right? But your nervous system basically plateaus around the age of 14. So whatever you do prior to that, that will be the ceiling for your nervous system. So if you have a robust nervous system, by that time, that's when you're supposed to really start to focus and specialize. So from, let's say, 13 to 16, the level of change that occurs if you have this robust nervous system, and now you start to specialize in one sport, that's when it's like outrageous how far someone can get. And it's not just that it's better for your nervous system, but your chances of injuring yourself is significantly less.
Makes sense.
Now, unfortunately, our world currently, even in Europe, it starts to go towards being more specialized, because for the linear mind, it makes more sense. And the world of sports is dictated by money so much these days that, when I speak to soccer clubs in Europe, many of the coaches tell me, the scouts, that the injuries we see at the age of 20, 21 are the type of injuries we used to see at age 30, 35.
Oh, wow.
It's because when you're specialized, your system is less robust. It really takes a toll on your career, as a biological specimen. And it limits your career's length oftentimes, So it's a very interesting conversation. At least I love the concept of specialized versus broad, right?
So you think that the Western world has had a detrimental impact on the approach to young people's development and passing into a sport because they're starting too young? It's too competitive, maybe.
I think it's a lot to do with social media and a lot to do with money, because parents are trying to get as soon as possible the most money out of their kid opportunities, at least let's say in sports like soccer or basketball. Still the parents are guiding the kids early on in their career. And nowadays, clubs are looking for talent super early on. And I mean, if you just look at Messi, right? When did Barcelona already brought him over there? I think he was like 13, if I remember from the stories. So he's a great example. Now, Messi is an outlier. I'm not going to tell you he's the average Joe, not at all. So there are exceptions. And the exceptions these days, I think, come out of a different environment. Let's say if you've grown up on the streets of Portugal and your parents had a small house, let's say smaller than 400 square foot, which a lot of people have. Indeed, wow. There are statistics showing that if you have a house bigger than 400 square foot, your chances of becoming a soccer superstar decreases like some unbelievable degrees.
Wow, what's the connection?
Well, if you have bigger house, you stay at home.
Oh, and you stay inside.
You stay inside and you're not on the street playing constantly soccer, Oh, so the environment matters. So if you're growing up there and you're on the street in Portugal, what's going to happen on the street? Well, you're going to play a heck of a lot of sports, and you're also going to get into fights. Yeah. And you're going to do all kind of stuff that humans are actually wired to explore as you grow up. So the artificial ex-Eastern European system that force you to explore all of these different physicalities, that can be replaced by environment. That's why if you look at Brazilian soccer players are so fantastic, because they grown up in a pretty rural area. They have to climb trees, they fight, they play all kind of different sports, swim, blah, 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 blah. So they naturally do the things that we're actually wired to do. The Soviets were great creating systems and science around it. So I was plugged into that. I also grew up in a very rural environment, so the way I grew up, I mean, we had the last house in my town and it was a small town.
Street sort of a thing?
It's literally, next door to us was the Danube, literally one hill over was the Danube. And we had no house beside us. So I grew up in a very foresty area, at least the first 7 years of my life. So,
wonderful.
Looking back, it was the best thing ever. And it created some connection to nature. Literally, I woke up in the morning, I went outside and my mom let me come in at lunch, but all the other kids were like that. We were all out all day until lunch. We'd go eat lunch. You kicked out again, come back for dinner. Usually my dad whistled, stuff like that. And then you knew that was the time to come in. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So how you dealt with that outside environment, it's very communal. It's very free. We explored on the edges, which is, I think it's really missing today in our world. All families and parents are over, especially in the Western world. Here we are in Los Angeles, right? I have 5 kids and, I managed to bring up, my 2 older ones are now 21 and 19. So they're basically out of the house. They're studying in Europe and they did a great job. But it was very, very, very hard for me to create systems where they could explore freedom. Because let's say in the world of soccer, we needed to transport them always, right? And they couldn't do it on their own because once they got good enough, we had to literally take them to the other side of the city every day. But same with every sport. Gymnastics was not right in our neighborhood. We needed to go somewhere else. So everything was always transporting the kids. And that system itself doesn't allow agency for the kids to take charge of their own lives. So we had to work so hard to figure out how to create that in them, that it's their thing, it's not my thing. So we made sure that we never...
Talk about that one concept for a moment.
Okay, yeah.
How important is that it's their thing, not your thing?
I
In
think...
general, for development.
Yeah.
For adults, is
Very, very good question. You know, I think that one of the biggest challenges that families and parents have, how to allow kids to develop grit, develop agency, as opposed to doing everything for them. Because I think parents have two roles in kids' lives. One is you have to love them. I think we're kind of wired for that. If you're a healthy, normal human being, you love your kid. We're kind of wired for that. Like you care for your infant. So that's there. The problem is you also need to give a structure to kids. And in a liberal world, what we live in, what does that mean is very controversial. So for example, me going out in the hills and telling my kids that, hey, see that peak? I'm taking this trail. You guys should take the other one and let's meet on the top. Most people here in Los Angeles are like, what are you talking about? Going up to the top of Bronson and your kid goes on a trail on their own? Well, there are rattlesnakes and everything. Well, as you might know, that I spent a lot of time living with hunter-gatherer tribes around the world. I don't know if you and I ever touched on that, but
I listened to your story once at a longevity dinner.
Okay.
That's where we first met.
Okay, so yeah, that's right. So that's normal. Like I know of kids who spend at age of 7, they spend weeks on their own in the middle of a desert because their parents need to go and get water, and certain supplies time to time, and then they're left alone there. Here in America, at the age of 8, if you go out in the evening and you leave your kid at home, I think it's against the law, right?
Yeah.
So how do you work as a parent trying to create independent kids who feel self-confidence? Self-confidence doesn't come from you giving it to someone. It needs to be earned. And the only way you earn it, if you have experiences that you're guiding, and sometimes you fail and sometimes you win, right? And unfortunately, in our world, with this 24-hour news media cycle, where everyone is focusing on the negative, right? Because you have to. If you show someone smiling on the street, no one is going to watch it. But if someone is crying because someone got hit by a car, you put a camera on it, right? So we have this distorted experience how the world is. Statistically speaking, we're living in the best possible time a human being ever lived. We have the least amount of crime relatively to the rest of history of humanity per population. And most people even doubt that, even though statistics are available. There are plenty of books on this. No one argues this, anyone who's into statistics. Yet most people, when you ask the parents, they're like, well, how could I let that? We live in a very dangerous city. Like, yeah, it's a dangerous city because there's a lot of cars, but it was dangerous in the 80s too, significantly more dangerous by any means, yet people had more freedom. So what happened, right? I think we became so panicky as adults, and we are limiting our kids' ability to explore life because we are panicking and we don't trust the system, right? So it's a big conversation, it's a long conversation, but essentially it's the hardest time to parent, I believe, in human history, because we are the most lonely parenting unit as, let's say, a mother and father or whatever, whoever is guiding the family. The couples, it doesn't matter the gender actually, but the couples who are guiding the lives of a child, they are very alone, as opposed to having allies. Like I grew up
in extended family and neighbors.
Okay, let's go about it. Maybe 3 different examples. Long time ago, when first time, now several decades ago, I started to live with the hunter-gatherer tribe. This is the first time I actually had a translator present, and the translator, eventually, I never took a translator after that trip with me. I realized it was more of a hindrance than anything else. But at the very beginning, I remember that there was this kid who was trying to make fire. I mean, kid, meaning early teen. And he was failing at it. And I remember that it was frustrating to watch him because he couldn't get it going, and you kind of felt uncomfortable. But I tried to make fire on my own many, many times, and I know how hard it is. So I didn't really feel that bad. I knew it was just not easy. And most people today, they never try to make fire without, modern tools. It really is a sufferfest. Sometimes it takes me 45 minutes to get the fire going. So the kid was suffering. And then someone went up to him from the tribe, and they were really harsh about it. I didn't understand what was going on. They didn't speak the language. But the kid was like, oh, very timid, and then got going, and eventually the fire got going. And it was like thinking, because there was a gentleman behind him who I knew was his dad. He was just really kind to him. There was no harshness or anything like that. Towards his own son, didn't help either. Just kind of left him alone. And I was thinking, this is so weird. What the heck is going on here, right? And I didn't understand. It took me a long time to figure out what was going on there. And eventually I learned that the way how historically humans are wired when it comes to families, that you as a parent, you're really not wired to give that harsh guidance to your kid. But you didn't have to, because there were the aunts and uncles who gave the harsh input.
Yeah.
And why is that important? Because if you are the parent, your kid's responsibility
is important for the development of the child.
No. Why it's important socially that you as a parent, you don't put harshness towards the kid. It's going to sound crazy for a second. It's because the kid's responsibility going to be to take care of you when you're old. And if you do harsh stuff towards the kid, then the kid might not be as such a not clear incentive to really take care of you. Now imagine this. You have a person there from the moment you're born, and they always just give you kindness and good stuff, right? Always support, always kindness, love, and all that, right? Now, that's wonderful if there is another mechanism that teaches you the harsh lessons, tell you what's okay, what's not okay. The aunts and uncles and all the other tribe members used to do that. And the parents never had to do that. So by the time the parent got old, the kid felt such an overwhelming level of love and care towards this individual that, of course, it was very easy. As opposed to the society we live in, how many parents end up in, old people's homes, right? Now, I grew up in a very different society than the Western capitalist world. So we spent tremendous amount of time with our parents. And I grew up with 26 cousins with a whole bunch of aunts and uncles as well, very, very closely. So we had a resemblance of this. That's why eventually I was able to understand what was going on in this hunter-gatherer tribe. But it took me a second to not to be judgmental, that how ridiculous is that the parents don't ever say anything negative. So genetically, I think it's engraved in us. So I understand, right? Yeah. But I understand, so Western parents want to just give the love and all that to their kid. But we don't have systems like a teacher. A teacher can't even say a negative thing anymore to a child because immediately they are being criticized. Yeah. So parents don't have that. Where I grew up, I mean, I'm not saying I recommend this for teachers to do, but I remember when a teacher grabbed my hair, another kid's hair, and they banged their head together. I'm not saying that's right, but what I'm saying is, right. So I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying it did not affect my well-being because I had such a robust family around me. It didn't matter. But I had respect towards the teachers, Most of my teachers were not like that, obviously. But here in the West, we believe that the teachers can really mess kids up with inserting authority. I don't think so. I really don't believe that. If you do your job at home, you raise robust kids, there's no teacher who's going to be able to mess up your kids. I had some nasty teachers in my life, and I grew up a very peaceful person, was able to insert themselves into society quite effectively, And as opposed to poor teachers today, they are scared of the kids. Literally, a kid can go out there, smack the teacher, and get away with it. And the teacher can't do anything about that in a physical sense. Also, if you think about all the anti-bullying laws now that we have in schools. Now, I know it's controversial, but since you wanted to talk on the edges, let's talk about that. I grew up in a society where, as a boy, every month, at least once, I was in a full-out fight in school. Like full out. Everything I got, I had to fight someone. And I spent the first, until grade 10, basically that was norm. Not just for me, but for most boys. And girls as well. They also physically exerted themselves this way. We didn't have the anti-bullying laws. Now, if you look at statistically, what would that mean? That would mean that there would be a lot of kids who have major issues, societal, antisocial sort of tendencies, stuff like that. That didn't happen. That was not the case. If you're looking at it today, what happens? There's a lot of kids having anxiety dealing with situations. So people forget, and I think we forget as a society, that people only learn on the edges. nobody learns when it's comfortable. You learn on the edges, i.e., if someone is bullying, you learn how to deal with the bully. Like sometimes you need to. And if you're not allowed to have all your tools available to you to explore that physically, psychologically, in every way, then you're limiting the learning process that is natural for a human being. So if you allow a kid to play video games where there's violence, but you never allow them to exert themselves in a violent way physically based on their own best wisdom at the time, they can't realize how bad it is to fight. You know, I've been to a lot of fights. I used to compete in kickboxing for a short period of time. I don't want to be in fights because I know how uncomfortable it is. If you never have a chance to experience it, you think it's something that's actually a viable way of dealing with conflict.
Yeah.
But you can only have that idea if you've never been in a proper fight. So we are taking that away from our kids, you know. Now, of course, you're like, okay, so how much rules are enough and what is too much? Now, I think that's something that we definitely need to explore further as a society, because kids suffer from not being able to learn on the edges anymore. We are too scared for them and we protect them so much, and we don't want to hurt their self-confidence and self-esteem, but the self-esteem only develops if you're able to explore world based on your best wisdom, meaning sometimes you mess up, sometimes you get yourself in weird situations. You need to develop tools how to mitigate those situations, how to deal with bullies, how to get yourself away from those people on your own terms. What are the skills, authentic skills you need to develop, you know? And if we don't allow that for the kids to develop authentically, we are giving them these broad ideas, what works and what doesn't work. And broad ideas never really work for the individuals. It's only worked for a very small percentage of the individuals, you know? Anyway, so we could go down on that path, you know?
Topic, and we talked downstairs about the physiological implications of environmental changes. And you're talking about the familial, community-oriented changes that have also occurred. So you take the physiological changes like plastics in our testes. And with a 16-year-old boy, it matters a lot more with that boy than it does me as a 57-year-old
That's right.
You know, adult male, because I'm not developing like that 16-year-old boy. And then you have access to all the world's porn, and they sit still for hours on end. They're not physically exerting. They're in the bigger house, air conditioned.
That's right.
No discomfort. There's no need to pursue something better. There's no need to even go socialize actually, like in real life. And you have this disastrous developmental set of circumstances that leads to, you know, the 25-year-olds that I see in my ecosystem today and younger that are just afraid. They're afraid to work hard because they think they're going to get burned out, when, as you know, they have no idea what that even is. And they have no idea what their capacity even is, because they're not pushing to the edges of it and possibly beyond what they think they're capable of, and feeling that stress and discomfort and then pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps afterwards, right? That's the whole developmental process. That circular experience is broken. And you can see it in young boys. You can even see it in young girls who are pursuing older men because their boys their age are not attractive, is they're not actually masculine. It's a scary mess of the circumstances. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 25. He's and we've been talking about this for a decade. And I don't know what it means for him. I know what it means for him as an individual. He's healthy, strong, hardworking, takes risks, is independent. He's very much like a normal 25-year-old from my generation, which is great. But I don't know what it means for all the people around him. You know, what does it mean for his friends and the economy? What does it mean for the economy? They're all going to be replaced by robots, I guess, which may be perfectly fine. If you don't have a lot of, you know, internal motivation, you don't have the desire, maybe that's okay. It sounds so sad, though, dystopian, dark.
Well, or we can look at it from a different point of view and say, you know, most people in the Western world have that underlying arrogance, believing that we overcame the usual limitations of nature. I think natural selection shows up in some sneaky ways. Most people don't realize that nature is still selecting. You just don't realize it.
So reproductive.
For example, like, you know, I remember when my first son, right before my first son was born, 2004, I came across this really interesting scenario where I was together at a party with a gentleman who was very high up in the realm of the health ministry, and he just had a 1-year-old. And we were just talking about kids, and I'm like, oh, I guess you have easy way to know where to go to vaccination and stuff like that. I was just joking, literally making a small conversation. He's like, oh, well, I don't vaccinate my kid. That was his note. And I was like, what? What do you mean you don't vaccinate your kid? He's like, it's too complicated of a subject. I don't really want to talk about it, but you can have a kid, so just look into it. So I was like very confused after, because growing up in Eastern Europe, we got vaccinations and it was fine. So once I looked into it, it got a little bit more confusing, because looking at how many vaccines I got as a kid, I think it was like maybe 6 of them or something like that, something ridiculously low amount comparison to now. And then I looked into it in 2004, and at the time it was a frightening number of vaccines you would enter first grade that you already had it in your system, and most parents didn't even know because they come in combos.
Yeah.
So then I was like, wait a second. I just saw the statistics that from 1960 to 2004, the average American male sperm count dropped 65%. Okay, so there is this huge amount of vaccines going into the kids. There's lower quality food, less movement, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, what is going on here? That the sperm count drops so much, because that's a big drop. I'm like, that's 1.5 generation, basically. And I was like, I don't think we can identify exactly what is the one reason. I think it's a combination of many different things. Mm-hmm. So if you don't cultivate your life, you don't pay attention, and you don't just willing to educate yourself and look at things, what makes sense and what's not, you don't take agency of your life, you become easily the victim of natural selection. Mm-hmm. Natural selection, just you're not going to, if in such a short period of time, your genetic lineage can drop that much sperm count, what if you take it another 25 years, which now we're like 20-something years away from that statistics? I don't think the sperm count thing got any better. So certain lineages going to sort themselves out in a few generations. So it is natural selection. Now, I think it's on the individual to figure out what are your opportunities, what are your circumstances, what do you need to make sure you mitigate in your life? Like, for example, I remember when I was having the most difficult time in my life, financially, early on in my career, back in the early 90s, and I had a very minimal amount of funds available to me every day. To be exact, $1.50 a day, Canadian.
Wow.
So what I did with that, I had 1 can of tuna, half a head of lettuce, right?
Like iceberg lettuce?
Yeah. I did that 40 days in a row, right? So what it did to me, it was not a healthy way of being, but that was the best I could do given my knowledge back then. What would most people do if they had such a low amount of income? They would buy maybe a hamburger. I don't know, most people, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to apply yourself to your circumstances and do the best you can. And if you do that for a lifetime, I think overall you're going to make decisions that will yield to a good life, where you can mitigate those modern natural selective systems that sneakily intertwined itself into our modern world. But we don't think about ourselves as biological beings that are still exposed to natural selection. It's just different. Yeah. It's not like how it used to be when you lived out in nature, you didn't pay attention, you became a prey, right? Now it's different. There are different predators that exist. There's algorithms, predators, medicine and stuff like that in a distorted way, predators as well, right? So it's an interesting environment that we live in, and you need to be on your A game as a human being. And what it means to be on your A game is different that it meant, let's say, 100 years ago or 10,000 years ago. Whatever you needed to do really well in, let's say, 100 years ago was similar somewhat than what you needed 1,000 years ago. But what you need today is different. It's very different. And you brought up something, Todd, that I think it's worthwhile to think about, which is, what are the reasons why kids have such a hard time, right? And why parents have such a hard time when it comes to become, let's say, a boy who's able to be very masculine, but it doesn't mean they're going to represent the Andrew Tate principles, right? But they're also be available emotionally and, all that, right? How can we mitigate all of that? I think parents have bigger role than ever because we are fighting now systems when it comes to ventures. Like if you look at something like Facebook, Meta, whatever way you still want to call it, looking at how ventures are developed. Ventures have leaders. And most people in the world of business don't think about that the decision makers, the leaders of ventures, their balances and imbalances will affect the venture itself. So if you're operating out of an imbalance and you create something.
You're referring to an internal imbalance.
Let's say the imbalance in their lives. I'll give you an example. My favorite example, and again, this is not dissing anyone. Our society currently rewards people to be very good specialists. They're not really rewarding people who are generalists, right? Yep. A specialist, a great example is, let's say, Steve Jobs in many regards, right? Steve Jobs was someone who passed away too early. So he didn't really understand health very well because he wouldn't have passed away that early. Mm-hmm. He was obviously a genius when it comes to being a specialist. He created something unbelievable, right? But we kind of know from his life that he was not necessarily the best parent, mm-hmm. was not the best spouse. Mm-hmm. He was a questionable employer or employee. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of imbalances that was present in his life. So what product he created is amazing, but how many of the unintended consequences of that product we are trying to mitigate right now as a society in the form of our children? How much trouble is for families, the screen time, the phones, the smartphones, all that. So you might ask the question, what are you saying? You're saying that iPhones are bad? I'm like, it's not about bad or good. It's more like the understanding that out of balance individuals, what they work, their imbalances will ripple into the products or the services they create. Mm-hmm. If you look at Facebook and Meta, there was a gentleman who had a hard time with socializing. Naturally wanted to create a system to help socializing. Created Facebook Meta. What did that do? Did that help the world to socialize more? No, it's actually rippled his own imbalances into the system. So now we mitigate as a civilization the incapability of socializing with each other because we have social media, which should really be called, let's say, anti-social media, right? So what I set out as a businessman, that I'm involved with 39 different ventures as equity holder. Sometimes I'm the founder of these things. Sometimes I step in as a president or what have you. I always work as a strategist, but the cornerstone for me is always the following. The leaders of these ventures has to represent a consistent aim for balance in every compartment of their lives. If a leader doesn't do that, I don't want to be involved with it because the unintended consequences of out of balance individuals, something our civilization can't handle anymore.
In every part of their lives?
Every part of their life. Like, for example,
their health, their
biology, their social life, the way how they interact with strangers, looking at the world globally, because we don't live in nations anymore. It is one of those ideas that we have. We live in nations. It's the most ridiculous thing. You look around yourself, everything is a global, like this gym has like so many different countries that societies attributed to this one gym here, right? So we live in a global world, and how you're applying yourself to that global world matters, So different compartments of your life, you have to apply yourself to every aspect of it, and you need to constantly aim for bettering yourself in every direction, i.e., being more of a generalist. Now, of course, mastery matters, but I think mastery only matters if it's also coupled with a very high level of general attention to every aspect of your life. That doesn't mean you need to be perfect, but there needs to be a constant aim. Like, I'm not expecting from anyone to be a top-level athlete, but you have got to always have that constant aim to better my understanding of my own biology. Because without that own biology, good luck having a healthy psychology. And if you don't have a healthy psychology, good luck to be the best leader or a best coworker, because you will be limited. If you have a back pain and you're sitting in a business meeting and you have shooting back pain, it will limit your ability to react properly and focus on what matters, which is a win-win. So biology distracts.
How do you assess this when you're looking at going into business with somebody? How do you get a
Very good question. Yeah, very good question. And I get that question that, okay, Csaba, I get it, but are you going to be the one who judges it? And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about mastery, right? What is mastery? Because it's one of the most confusing things in the world of influencers, right? What is the mastery? I know so many incredibly successful influencers who couldn't actually get their own career going in the field where they ended up becoming influencers. Because doing something and talking about it is two different things, right? The ones who can't do and they glitched, let's talk about fitness since we're, this podcast, but they have six-pack. Now you can put yourself on video, show your six-pack, talk about something that easy to understand, and it will engage people because you look the part and then you set something that's engaging, right? Now, when narratives like this hijack the conversation, it's very easy to start to think about them as masters. In my opinion, mastery is the following. There's two components to it. One, you need to represent the mastery with your own life. Step one. Step two, you need to be able to teach that mastery to others, and those others need to also represent the same mastery, right? And not in a short haul, but in the long run. So
just sort of chipping away at constant
exactly
all the important aspects of your life.
Exactly. And
balance. You're generally, literally generally, in a better space.
With what we are talking about in that concept, it takes one master of balance to be able to see potentially if there is balance in someone else. But it's not good enough. You also had to be able to teach balance. And the people who you taught that balance to, if they represent balance, then you have a place at the table to make a decision who has that appropriate level of focus towards balance in all compartments of their lives, And I worked my butt off for 50 plus years as well, to create that balance. What are the upsides? That I have a life which is very vital. I have 5 kids. I have an incredible wife. I have an incredible ex-wife who is the godmom for our, 3 little ones. We have a modern family. It didn't come easy. We worked really hard to create that system in our world, but we have this wonderful tribe. I have an incredible social group and work group that have major overlaps. So I really worked hard at these things. I have a business degree. I have a kinesiology degree. I have a performance art degree. So I pushed myself in many different fields. I lived with many different societies, not just from growing up in socialist country and living in capitalism, but spending a lot of time with hunter-gatherer tribes and people who live very close to nature in many different continents, in Asia, in Africa, in South America. So I forced myself to look at things from many different perspectives. And it takes time. There are significantly wealthier people than I am at my age.
Regarding the fact that you're looking for people that are in pursuit of those things.
Exactly.
Like they have an awareness of the need to develop that.
But it takes one to know one, right?
Yep.
So if you don't practice it, but let's say a CEO of a big company decides, I love that idea. From here on, I'm going to make a decision to only choose people who have balance. But if you don't have the balance, then how you can see that, right? It just becomes an idea. So what you end up choosing are specialists, because that's what usually, like if you look at a psychologist, psychologists are my pet peeves a little bit because psychology is a very interesting science. And we know statistically that most psychologists go into the space of psychology because they have such challenges and they try to figure it out and they learn it and they get to an okay place through their studies. And now they're teaching that. In my opinion, going from broken to normal is not mastery. I don't think anyone should share any of their wisdom based on getting to normal. That's a private matter. Keep it to yourself. Don't spread it because it creates confusion.
Yep.
But of course, that's not the world we live in. Influencers are, a fantastic salespeople. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's such a new system that we are still in the process of shaping it into something that's going to be great for humanity on the long haul. If we are putting that beautiful capability of selling ideas, and we find a way to really emphasize true masters' voices the combination of the two can really provide some amazing tools and skills on the mass level to our Western world and for the world. We're not quite there yet, but I'm always an utter optimist. I believe that's where we're headed. That's what, with the venture, some of the ventures I'm involved in, that's what I'm trying to do, is creating a platform for people who are true masters, who are not just specialists and masters in one space, but also represent everything else. Because your words mean different things, and your approach is going to be very different based on balance or lack of balance. Like, people who know me from the business world know that when I meet with someone, I never Google anyone. I try to know the least amount about them because I want to first meet them as humans, because it's impossible not to speak to titles and access. So if I talk to a billionaire, right, and if I know who they are fully and all that, it's very, very hard to keep your mind and not talking to the opportunity, but talking to the human, right? So I force myself and I ask my team to make sure, don't give me breakdowns who this person is. Let me just meet them as people. And oftentimes these people tell me, hey, can you send me some information about some of the projects you want to talk to me about? And I'm like, I don't want to share that. Because soon as we start to do that, we are not engaging as humans. So did that always work? No. I had
You
times.
continue to do that now?
I only do this. I don't ever meet with anyone.
Really?
First time about business.
For that.
It is what it is, but that's the only way I can bring my best to the table as a balanced human being. I need to connect to that person. I need to fall in love with some aspect of their lives. And I don't want to fall in love with necessarily about how much money they have, because it's so easy to do that. And I try not to, but we're all humans. If you're talking to someone who easily they can fund one of your projects, somewhere deep down, your patterns gonna make you behave in a certain way. I want to show everyone truly who I am. There are faults in it, imbalances, blah, 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 blah. But there's a constant aim to figure out how to connect the best possible way with every human being. And as of now, at least, we need to start with our very humanity, meaning what's human in you, what's human in me, i.e., I want to hear about your story. What is your story as a human being? And I want to tell you my story. And those two stories should meet first. And once we meet, there's an overlap, then we can start to see those overlaps, what type of projects, what type of ventures we can maybe collaborate together, right? I don't like the ideas of compartmentalizing life. I don't like the idea of family, friends, work. And the reason I don't like it, because I realize with hunter-gatherers, that doesn't exist. You hunt, you love, and you socialize with the same group of people. That's what we are wired for. So we have forced ourselves to compartmentalize. That these are the work people, I only meet them for this amount of time in this environment, and that's that. I don't talk about certain things because that's too personal. We're not wired for this. It creates confusion and imbalance.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So I am trying to force myself to look at every human being as a human being. And the only way you can do that if I use that approaches. And that once you start from there, things can evolve in an organic way a little bit. And, anyhow. So I could go down on the rabbit hole on any of these things because I feel very passionate about it,
Yeah, that's clear.
But we are lacking depth. And that's why, when you and I connected, I said, Todd, can we make sure we don't talk shorter than 2 hours? Because then we're just going to create, potentially noise. Because if you don't go deep, you stay on the surface. And we already have plenty of information on the surface. I like to just add to the depth in some regards in our world. That's what I really set out for myself,
So that's your overarching strategy, just depth. I love that
Yeah,
concept.
yeah.
I just never really considered that. Everything is so superficial, right?
It's
Quick,
quick.
little bits of information
Yeah.
intended to sell something.
Yes, and it goes back to our original point that going deep requires grit, right? If you don't have the grit and capability of concentrating, it's very hard to go deep. You stay on the surface. And in the consumer world, it's very easy to have clickbaits, right?
Yeah.
Easy, low-hanging fruit that you just reach for, and that's that. And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with going broad as well. I think it's great that, my sons, for example, they are into many, many different things on the surface. Like they're into cooking, which I was not into when I was young.
Cool.
They're really good at it, and it's mostly to do with social media.
Are those the older ones?
The older ones, yeah. So they're very much into, and actually my daughter as well, who's 8, is very much into cooking. Now, she's not on social media at all, but she's also into cooking, but mostly due to my older ones and my wife. And my older ones are definitely into cooking because of social media, because they saw these amazing burgers. And at one point it was so yummy what these influencers were making that I want to make it too. So there are upsides to all of this. There's nothing wrong with going broad through social media, but you also need to have the capability of going deep. Right? And where you need to go deep, I think matters. Biology, your own biology, going really deep and understanding what are the cornerstone of your biology. It's a fundamental role of every human being. I don't care if you're a lawyer, if you are a trainer, you're still a biological being. Therefore, understanding your own biology is superbly important. And you simply reading a book about nutrition ain't going to do it. I don't care what a great master wrote that book. It's still generalized wisdom. And if you go on influencers' words, that's even more difficult than a book. At least the book lays out a step-by-step approach based on a certain ideology and makes a point. Influencers just throw out bits of wisdoms here and there, and it's up to you to put it together. Mm-hmm. I think the cornerstone of biology is that you need to take agency of your own being. Mm-hmm. And do educate yourself. But frankly, I think information is overrated when it comes to health, and used wisdom is underrated. If most people know already enough about health and fitness, in my opinion, to make a significant difference in their lives, that I don't care who you are, it's very hard not to know certain things. And if you just take one of those, like most people know, sugar is not really the best thing for you.
Yeah.
If you just take that one wisdom and you apply it in your life, it's going to serve you way better than listening to hundreds of, influencers talking about the quick fix things.
Yeah. So
use your best wisdom and put it to use in your life day to day. When no one is watching, when it's not sexy, when it's it's inconvenient, right? Because it is inconvenient.
Yeah. In general, those tactics are not sexy.
Exactly.
They're kind of boring.
It's boring as heck.
It's
yeah.
really like just about any part of being successful with something, whether it's a career or a relationship or your body.
Yes.
They're basic and a little bit boring, and you have to do them repetitively for long periods of time to really see the fruits.
Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing. If you look at business and ventures, right? What is the MO of a successful entrepreneur or someone who's leading a venture? In many regards, I heard it described the following way, which I very much like. The ability to sucking for a long time is a prerequisite for you to succeed, because you have an idea where you want to get to. In comparison to that, you're not there. Mm-hmm. So you're in your own mind, you're kind of sucking.
You're eating tuna and ice cream.
For example. So if you're willing to suck for a long time, the chances are you will eventually succeed. The problem is that requires grit. Yeah. And grit is not highly advertised on our social platform anymore, because it's hard, right? So I think that's a prerequisite, how long you're willing to kind of suck at something. And then also the boring stuff. The people who really succeed in life, doesn't matter what direction you look at, they're willing to do the stuff that most regularly, but most people don't like doing, period. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, but
it's
the funny
cornerstone of all great successes, right?
I agree. And also the funny part is when you start doing that, eventually things do get easier. In Hungarian, we have a saying that help yourself and God will come and help you too.
Doing the boring things,
yeah, like
difficult things become easier to do.
Exactly. Like I remember a long time ago, now it's almost 2 decades ago, this young man who I had the good fortune to help to mitigate some of his, weight challenges. He told me that, Csaba, the funny thing is, before I really dug into health, I was able to go to Taco Bell and eat 6 burritos, no problem. Mm-hmm. And now that I think he lost like 150 pounds or something like that. And he's like, now if I eat a non-organic meat, I feel like my stomach is like hurting because you resensitize yourself. Mm-hmm. But there is a process of breakthrough, like buckling down and do the hard work But eventually your biology starts to help you, because once you're more sensitive, you will be guided towards better decisions. You know, if you're addict to sugar, breaking that habit is hard first, but eventually you actually don't really feel like to have that much sweets either. Like I just went through 8 weeks of ketogenic diet myself. Every year I do that for about 6 to 8 weeks. And right now the concept of a cake literally makes me gag. You know, now normally I do like eat sweets time to time, but not after having such a ketogenic protocol. So I feel very good in my body right now. It fits my system. That's, you know, so what I'm trying to say, once you do your job, your biology is going to help you too, right? But it requires for you to get to a certain level of balance. That's one of the things, my pet peeves, when people say, I want to listen to my body. I want to listen to myself. I'm like, well, you can listen to yourself if you're in balance and you're well. Because if you listen to yourself and you have overwhelming amount of candida in your system is going to tell you to eat every cake because the candida makes you crave the sugars, right? Like an alcoholic. It's like you crave the alcohol. So if you just listen to yourself, you're just going to drink all the time. But you know that's not the right thing to do. That's your highest wisdom. How much you can listen to your highest wisdom is the challenge. Once you manage, and many people do, and they break through, they listen to their highest wisdom, they create a way of eating for a while, let's, not eating sugar, for example, and then they break through and they resensitize themselves. And then suddenly, yes, you can listen to yourself, right? But it's just not that easy. It just takes some time.
The voices of wisdom are sort of lulled to sleep almost, right?
Yep.
Because of processed foods and other things that we're exposing ourselves to, where we have this disconnect between our natural ability to recognize how we feel to our behaviors. They sort of get distorted, right?
Yes, yeah.
And then after time, as you're describing, it gets cleaned up and clarified and clear. And then it starts to become easy at that stage.
Yep.
Right? But it's challenging to get to that.
It is challenging, mostly because we have this survival reflex, right? Let's not forget that our biology developed to live in a very different way than we live today, right? So in nature, you can't really do the wrong thing for yourself, right? So you don't do things which is really bad for you. The environment doesn't provide that. Like if you live in nature, right? And if you eat things that grew out of nature, i.e. you hunt an animal or you gather stuff, right? Those things are good. They grew out of nature. So you can't really do the bad stuff for yourself. Now, if you have to do the bad stuff, for example, I'm going to give you an extreme example. Drinking your own urine, right? It's a survival reflex. You will have to do that if things are extreme. Like, environmental changes and you live in a desert area. I mean, our whole species evolved into what it is due to major weather pattern changes, right? So our whole system is a result of these giant changes and we adapted to that. So let's say you're forced to drink your own urine. Horrific. First time, second time, third time. But if you have to keep on doing this regularly for over 2 weeks, you get used to it. Do you get used to it because it's good for you? Not necessarily. It's because it's a necessity. And nature is like, if you do something that's bad for you for this long, that means your environment demanding it and you have no other way to survive, keep irritating you, doesn't make sense. So let's numb you to it. You got to do what you got to do to survive. So that worked great throughout our evolution, right? And eventually, hopefully you got yourself to a place where you had fresh water again and you didn't have to do these things all the time. So then you pivoted away from that, right? But in our modern world, there are many different things that we do to ourselves that is not good for you. And maybe the first time you do it, your stomach is like, ugh, this felt weird, but the sugar tasted good while I ate it, but now I feel, eh.
Yeah.
And you keep doing it because, let's say, all your buddies do that, and you're a teenager and you're just trying to go with it, like drinking alcohol. Like I never met anyone who liked beer first time they tasted it. Yet many teenagers end up drinking beer later on.
Yeah.
Was that because it tasted good, or was that because you forced yourself to do it because that was the cool thing? You keep drinking beer for 2 weeks or whatever amount of time, you become numb to the negative aspect of it that your body tells you it's really not that good, and you become numb to it, right? So you're numbing yourself, and you do this numbing system in so many different ways, like sitting in a chair. If you look at first graders, the first ones who are really put in a chair, you got to stay here. They're not very happy about it. They're like fidgety, moving. The teachers need to, you got to be quiet, right?
Yeah.
But eventually you grow numb to it. And then you're okay sitting a long time. And eventually you almost become like addicted to sitting a lot, right? But it's not because we are wired for it. Society systems forced us to become numb. So if you want to rekindle your sensitivity physiologically, you need to get more physical. And eventually sitting for a pretty long period of time becomes more challenging. And that's a good thing. Like right now in NC, whenever I talk on, I always squat in my chair. Right now, because the microphone is hard to do that, but you know what I'm saying. So resensitizing ourselves is very important. And how you do that in many regards, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. It requires constant work on self, because resensitizing your biology and resensitizing your social abilities to read situations is also something is important. Because, empowering ourselves to be willing to see when things are off is something, and acting based on what we believe is off is really not encouraged very much. Like if you sit in a school bench, right? And if a teacher expresses some improper way of dealing with a situation, you're not incentivized to discuss it and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry, but what were you doing there when you were doing this and this and this? It doesn't make sense to me." That conversation is not incentivized. So you're forced in schools to also numb your sensitivity to question things when it comes to social norms. Also if a kid misbehaves in school, but there are all those rules around it, you can't really address certain things. Then over time, you become also numb when it comes to understanding social cues. Right? So we are just bombarded in our world with all these different systems, and we become number and number, and we are not able to realize.
We're designed to adapt.
We are designed to be very, 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 we're designed for a different environment. So I'm not telling you to go back to a cave. That's not at all. I think the mastery of humanity for the future, that we need to remember and understand what we were wired for. And then somehow we need to plug in this incredible system of technology and access and wealth that we created. That's a hard thing to do. Yeah. Most people think that whatever we have here in the West is so fantastic, and I love it. I love capitalism. Don't misunderstand me with everything I say. I love capitalism. I love everything about that we have here in our world. But we gotta take also the lessons, and understanding what we are wired for. Without that, you will become a slave to the very system that we developed, right? And we live in a scientific materialistic world currently, and that shows up as a consumer system. And the consumerism birthed out of an aim to increase our chance of survival. Everything that we do as human beings is just a constant attempt to try to increase our chance of survival, right? I have this thesis that I developed now almost 2 decades ago, which I call the core survival ability benefiting activities, which right now spells out my name, CSABA. But essentially, when I developed this, it was for internal use for my team. And it was so close to my name when I kind of wrote out what are the things that I believe is important for a human being to think about. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's so close to my name. I'm just going to make some, changes for fun. I never thought I would ever bring it out publicly at all. But the thesis is the following. Any action that the human body creates, there's only one reason why it's creating it. It's trying to improve your chance of survival. Like human being in a perfect homeostasis, you're literally not even breathing. You're not moving. Soon as you have to increase the chance of survival because you're lacking something, i.e. oxygen, you do a physical movement of inhalation. So that's increasing your chance of survival. So breathing is a survival technique, right? Makes sense.
Makes total sense.
Getting up from the ground, it's a chance of increasing your survival. You get up from the ground, your chance of survival is going to be bigger than if you just stay down. So it's, again, a survival technique. Work. It's increasing your chance of survival. So everything boils down to the origin of action, which is increasing your chance of survival as a biological being. We forget about that. We don't analyze it. We don't think about it. If you don't understand it, it's very hard to know the origin of action in every compartment of your life. So here we are in a gym, right? If someone don't think about this, they start to believe that bench pressing is the way for a healthier body. As opposed to, we know from 0 to 4, there's a very predictable movement pattern learning that a human being goes through. Doesn't matter if you grew up in Los Angeles or in the middle of Africa, in the Kalahari. The movements that you learn, i.e. first being able to move your head and then reaching and then flipping on your tummy and you're pushing yourself up and crawling and all that, it's very predictable. It's wired deep within us. So the first 4 years, if you're looking at an LA kid versus a Kalahari, Zuwasi, you won't find much difference. But at 4 is when you really start to divert because you're plugging into two very different societies. The 4-year-old in the Kalahari, they're going to keep on building on those first blocks. And they keep crawling because when you try to sneak up on an animal, you got to crawl. How many people after age of 4, when they enter, let's say, a little bit later in school, how often can you crawl around in a school setting? Or as an adult, how many opportunities do you have to crawl around? Not many.
Only when I hunt.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's not very often for most people, right? So
never for most people.
So age of 4 approximately where we really start to divert our physiological capabilities. So now I pushed really myself into exploring physicality myself. I'm very proud that at one point I was able to squat 90 repetitions with 405 pounds. That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? 2 1-minute rests in between, but still, it's pretty crazy. I also wrote a book about how to run barefoot marathons every week for 3 months out of every year.
Wow.
Right? So I pushed myself into many different directions. I wanted to see it. And I remember the very last Olympics.
Talking about barefoot running, are you talking about barefoot or barefoot shoes?
No, barefoot.
Barefoot.
Yeah. Barefoot shoes are just another consumer way of talking about something. I don't understand how barefoot something when there's something on your foot. It's like a complete strange thing. We can go down on that path as well. The human physiology. The last athlete that came to me who wanted to work together with me, she was a national champion sprinter. She came to me and I was like, I don't really do these things anymore when I work with individual athletes. I did that for the first 10 years of my life, predominantly, really focusing on that. And then the last 20 years of my life, I really broadened and focused on many other things. So this athlete was really adamant about wanting to work with me. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, you're able to run in a crazy way that I've never seen anyone able to do. Like, why are you able to do it? I want to have that. That's going to give me the edge. And I'm like, wait a sec, I hear you, but the reason I left working with athletes, predominantly competitive athletes, because I caught myself trying to talk them out of competing. So I'm like, because I do 26 different sporting activities in a yearly cycle.
Currently?
Yeah. And those 26 different sporting activities also yield to an amazing ability in running. But it's not because of my crazy focus on running only. I run a lot, obviously, but I do a lot of other things as well. And that itself, by the time you're 50 plus, you have some good abilities.
Yeah.
But it's not because of I focused for the last 2 years on running crazy. No, it's because I never stopped from the age of 4 to keep exploring these many different physicalities. So you eventually become pretty robust. So here's an interesting one. At least interesting to me. Maybe you're going to also relate to it. So I had the good fortune to meet a gentleman who was voted the best endurance athlete of all time by People's Magazine. He won the Hawaiian Ironman 7 times in a row, Mark Allen. And Mark is an interesting bloke. I met a lot of athletes. I worked with a lot of different athletes in many different sports, but he was interesting. And you know why he was interesting? Because he was gifted when it comes to his physiology. And he literally never came in lower than, I think, 3rd in any competition he ever entered.
Wow.
But he was never able to win until a certain moment in his life. And that moment was when he tried to do everything right, And he worked on himself as a runner, he was in triathlon, right? Runner, as a biker, as a swimmer. He worked in the traditional Western way. As a specialist, hyper-focused on all of these things, and went at it. And he did really well, but he still couldn't win. And then he got so fed up with the whole thing. And he's like, I just can't win. And then he met a Peruvian wisdom keeper. Wisdom keeper. Someone who was considered a medicine man in his
ayahuasca type situation.
That's a really broad subject. So this particular individual was not using ayahuasca as the part of their healing methodology. But there's many other different parts of Peru. They use different animal, plant medicine. So this medicine and this wisdom keeper was different. But they met, and it allowed Mark to kind of chill out. He gave him a perspective that was a bit different about life. It was not about making you a better athlete. It's like, look at life a little bit differently. And Mark relaxed a little bit. And then he came back the next year training totally differently. Not because he was like, okay, I'm going to try to embrace now this, let's say, spiritual sort of way of being, but because the narrative in his mind changed and his focus from the linear, highly focused way of being changed, he broadened himself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he came back and he trained differently. He didn't push nearly as hard. And miraculously, he won. And then he kept using a different balanced way of existence, and he became a true legend in his space. Mm. Now, many people probably read Born to Run who listen to this podcast. Born to Run is an interesting book. It talks about a group of Tarahumara Mexican Native Mexicans, let's be politically correct here, whose culture required them to run long distances. And then in 94, a group of folks brought them into Leadville 100, which is the most grueling ultra-distance race in America. And these Tarahumaras, they won, which was fascinating, right? Yeah. And most people made the conclusion in our Western world that, so they must have a very good way of training to be that good at running. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, when you spend time with these hunter-gatherer type of societies that live very close to nature, they don't insert themselves unless they have to. Mm-hmm. Indeed, they do whatever it takes to be smarter and not having to run.
So
right?
Low-grade energy conservation and output. And then periodic aggressiveness.
Well, that's the thing, that human beings are wired to be an absolute masters to use their biology in nature and succeed that way. And when you live like a human being, as a side effect, you have incredible capabilities when it comes to ultra-distance physicality. Now, based on your genetics, if you are, let's say, in the South Pacific, you will have the capability to canoe for hundreds and hundreds of miles. If you are in the sub-Saharan Zuwasi, you can run down animals with your sheer, pure physical endurance. If you're a Tarahumara in Mexico, also, you have the capability of run at incredible rates in hilly areas. So that made me start to think.
Do you think that's genetic, not developed?
So exactly, that's my point. That okay, so how's that possible that we can have in the Western world someone who trained like Mark Allen trained at the first part of his career, highly focused, and they get to a certain capability. And then there can be someone from a completely different society, never focuses on that, and they still have comparable capabilities. That's what was mind-boggling to me. Because one of them, like the Westerner, you had to distort your... me who worked with so many professional athletes in the past, they had to distort their social life and every other compartments of their lives to create that specialty. Mm-hmm. And the other group, actually the balance from their society that created as a side effect the amazing physicality. So I was like scratching my head. How's that possible? Can we bring that into our modern Western world? So I tried to wreck my mind and see these different cultures around the world who has this mastery, because the Chukchis, who are reindeer hurdlers in Siberia, they also have this incredible capability of running in extreme weather for 70, 80, 100 miles regularly. I mean, literally on the daily basis, Wow. Like, how do they have that? Like, how can they do that? So I tried to break down what are the commonalities between these different groups. And I came up with a system that I think is very simple, but if people just utilize that, they can really go far with it, which is everyone squats. Okay? They are in a squatting position for a pretty long period of time. Average human being across different cultures, if you live close to nature, you squat approximately 2 hours a day. Not all at once, but,
Throughout the course.
5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, so on and so forth. So about
You mean
2.
squatting to grab something from the ground?
Well, you're down and you're fidgeting with something and you're in a squatting position, you're staying down there. Okay, so approximately about adds up to average about 2 hours a day. Kneeling for approximately an hour, hour and a half a day. Okay, they also walk approximately 6 to 8 miles a day, approximately. Not leisure walk, but a relatively good paced walk. And they also dance every week at least once to a quite exhausting stage. So squatting, kneeling, walking long distance, dancing in a very intense way. You do this for a lifetime, you will run like heck.
That makes
Right? It's interesting. They never really run, but if you ask them to run, they can run like crazy. So that's why it's so interesting to look at.
Is it hard for them to run for that long? Or do they just do it?
What's fun? So that's a really good question. So the biggest challenge for the Tarahumara was when they participated in this Leadville 100, it was hard for them to wrap their mind around to just running for the sake of winning. That was very hard for them.
Oh, interesting.
And right? And they tried to mitigate.
Because it was a utility to them.
It was exactly for the concept of winning. It is really not wired in us as humans. We're really not wired to compete in some, which we can go into it a little bit more in a second. We are not really wired to compete as a species. Indeed, we are the opposite of competition. We are all about bringing the most out of the least amount of physicality. We are amazing ultra distance athletes, and ultra distance is not about, exert as fast as you can and win the minute. It's all about lasting the long as you can, right? So they had a hard time wrapping their mind around the people who asked them, do you want to participate in this? But they came up with a system. And the system was like, well, don't lead. Just track the leaders and be behind them. That way you can follow something. Because we are wired to, like a dog will run after something, but you tell them to just run, they're going to be like, why? Right? Humans are the same. You need to track something. So if you tell the Zuwasi that, hey, let's test how the sub-Saharan African tribe I spent time with, tell them, hey, let's run and see how well we do, because I want to study you. And I actually did this. And you're like, okay, let's run. And they bolted and ran as fast as humanly possible. And I was like, no, that's not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see how you run long. And they're like, yeah, but run for what? Right? It's very, with the Western mind, you're like, well, run to show us. But they're like, why? I need to run for some reason. It's too much exertion. Why would I do that? But if there's a kudu and you run after the kudu, then there's a goal. So these Tarahumara basically were running after the leaders. And then only at the very end, because they understood the experiment, they passed them. And you can read in the book what was the psychology behind when those big shot ultra distance runners who were just passed by the Tarahumara, who were having a conversation when they passed them towards the end. What was that? So what I'm trying to say here, Todd, we have this incredible biology. It's wired to so much more profound capabilities that most Westerners understand.
Yeah, I totally.
It's unbelievable what we can do with our body. The problem is we got it backwards. We believe that you going to a gym can be the solution for health and fitness and wellness. Now, that can be a part of it. And indeed, in a Western world, it's a very wise way, making that part of your procedure. But your lifestyle makes the world of a difference. Like, there's no gym that's you're going to go to and say that, so I go to the gym because I want to get that 2 hours of deep squat every day. This is not going to happen, right? Dancing. It's just not going to really happen for most people. But if you're like, okay, so how can I create a lifestyle? So I'll give you my example.
You inject dancing into your...
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time with my kids. We blast. We have a sound system. We put the music on and we dance in certain mornings. The kids love it. They go nuts on it. And we just goof around, my wife and I. And it's a protocol, right? Where it birthed out of.
It's a protocol.
It's a protocol that we do to bond as a family, and it's something that's very easy to do because it's fun. You don't need to make the kids that, hey, let's exercise, kids, because it's good for you. You put a song on that they love and we love, then it's fun. And it's bond us as a family. It does something physical, and it's also trains our system the way how we are wired, right?
Yeah.
When, if you spend time, for example, with one of the tribes that I spent a lot of time with, when you succeed hunting-wise, that night you will sing and dance. If you don't succeed, you just sing, which is interesting, So when you sing and dance after hunting, you dance. That happens at least once a week because you will hunt and you need to succeed in it at least once a week. They oftentimes succeed more than once. So at least there's 1 or 2 times of dancing. And then there are the healing protocols. The healing, historically, it's very physical for a human being. So the Zuwasi, now, you can't think about it in linear fashion because it gets confusing. But I'm going to explain it in linear fashion. The Zuwasi believes that every human being has medicine exist in them. But the medicine comes through only through sweat. So if you don't sweat, the medicine doesn't work. So when they try to heal, and they don't believe individuals having the mastery of healing, they believe every human being has the capability of healing. You have the ability to bring that medicine up from the bottom of your stomach and bring it up and make it into sweat. And when you reach that state, you're able to heal others and yourself. So they go through regularly healing protocols because it is important for a human being to constantly heal yourself from whatever is going on. And then also heal others who are in your tribe. Now, how that works, and the reason I like to bring the Zuwasi, because the Zuwasi has the longest running culture that we know of in human history. They have 70,000-year-old cave drawings that represent things that they still talk about today. Not the Zuwasi who lives in town, in cities, but the Zuwasi who still live close to nature. Now, the first time I was able to dig myself into their culture was in the 90s, and I was very fortunate to get so interested about them before our Western technology reached them. So they still practiced a lot of the stuff that today, in 2025, they don't practice anymore either. So I saw the loss of that because it is sad, but there are some who are still trying to reach back, and practicing those things. So the reason I bring them as an example, because we have a society that we live in, this scientific materialistic world, which is about 300 years old. The system of way of looking at how to be human in this society is about 300 years old, approximately, using science and ventures and tailor a society around that. Their system goes back 70,000 years plus. Imagine the robustness of a culture that had that much time to create systems, which is rituals and traditions, to create the how to be human, i.e. the human manual. The human manual that is missing as of now from our culture. And the reason it's missing is not because there's anything wrong with the Western world. We're just too juvenile of a culture. We haven't had the time to develop that human manual, that if you're born into our culture, the rituals and the tradition teaches you how to utilize yourself the best in your lifetime. Now, the Zuwasi has that because they had so much time to evolve it. It's not written down, but it's in their rituals and traditions. So that's why I like to bring them as a great example. Not necessarily because we need to try to take everything that they know and they have the answers. You can't lead a life in our Western world with their principles. But I think we need to understand what are the overlaps, what are the things that may be very human in all of us and we all need to practice. So when they try to heal, it's very physical. i.e. they get into a state when they're very physical and they start to sweat and they push themselves. They push themselves to the edge of their physical abilities where they literally collapse. And that sometimes takes more than 24 hours continuous dancing. When you push yourself to your absolute limit. And when you get to the edge of your physicality and you collapse, then there is a an experience that you have that shows you existence in a very different way. Now,
At the end of your physicalities, when you can't take another step. You just have to.
you literally collapse because you're so exhausted, but there is a level of understanding that shows up there that you need to witness as a human being if you want to understand what is existence about. It's hard to get to, but if you look at Siberian wisdom keepers, that they are called the shamans. Shamans are actually, historically, they really exist only in Siberia. Most people think they exist all over the place. Yeah, shamans are historically in Siberia. They use weather medicine. Weather medicine, basically, no one really talks about it because it's inconvenient. It's not comfy. You can't just drink something and lay down and chill. Weather medicine is when you expose yourself to such an extreme weather that you push yourself to the edge of your existence, and what you experience there, you come back from it, and it gives you a different understanding of what you are and how you are connected to everything. So here in Los Angeles, you brought up ayahuasca previously. I believe that us as human beings, we used plant medicine, animal medicine, weather medicine, and many other type of medicines that was very native to certain geographical areas that allow us to get to the edge of our existence. And we discovered something that allowed us to understand how we really belong into, you can say, the universe or nature or whatever your belief system is. So people have that yearning. It's in us, but we don't have systems in our Western world. That's why people are interested in exploring ayahuasca, right? So here people gather in Los Angeles, New York, Berlin, wherever you are, and they meet and they drink ayahuasca. I understand why they do that, because there's a yearning to explore psilocybin mushroom and all that stuff, right? But the problem is, it's not that simple. When it comes to these type of systems where it's very geographic and very ethnographic, these systems. Like ayahuasca, let's just bring that as an example. Ayahuasca is basically a couple of different plants, and they make a brew out of it. That brew itself exists, that those plants exist in a certain part of the Amazon jungle. Mm-hmm. There are other animals and plants that co-evolved with those plants. And there's a human society that co-evolved through thousands of years in that same system. The whole system together creates that experience. So if you take a piece of it, like ayahuasca, let's say, meaning the brew, and you bring it here, you take that out of the environment and you bring it here and you think it's going to do the same thing. But ayahuasca is more like a key to a door. That's it. Is the key. The key is not what matters. What comes through the door, what matters. Whoever guides what comes through that door, what matters. So most people, hear they're like, oh yeah, I have this shaman who giving me ayahuasca here in the Western world. Well, first of all, the word shaman itself, I already alluded to it. It's kind of an interesting concept. Let's not go down on that path, but just because you drank ayahuasca 100 times, that does not make you into an ayahuasquero, a healer. That allows you to give people a psychedelic experience. Psychedelic experience is different than a healing, ethnographic healing protocol. Two different things. So what we are falling into a mistake here in the West right now, that we are trying to use plant medicine and we believe just taking it is the answer. It's not. We are not creatures that only have genetics. Genetics, of course, control things, and you can trigger that. There's a psychoactive effect that triggers something genetically. Mm-hmm. But we are also, there's epigenetics. Your environment also creates the experience. Yeah. And whoever is in that epigenetic environment, i.e. plants, animals, other humans, healers, wisdom keepers, so on and so forth, that will create the healing experience versus just a psychedelic experience. Mm-hmm. So it's a really big subject. That's why I'm saying that cross-cultural learning, it's a very difficult one. You cannot steal from one culture a system and bring it here and believe that it's going to work the same way. Because
pieces of
it doesn't work like that.
It's lacking the ethos.
Exactly. It's like yoga is a prime example. I remember, I'm a kinesiologist and I worked for a long time with injuries and stuff like that. And there were so many injuries that came from yoga practices. And it's the same thing. Yoga evolved in a very particular culture, and it was part of a culture. It birthed out of like the sweating yoga, right? That's my favorite example. Sweating yoga, but it came out of an environment where that was the environment, where you were sweat because it was so hot and humid. And that's where you practice it. Now you bring that sweating over here, what's going to happen? The people over here who are not used to that environment, they're going to lose all kind of minerals and eventually creates bloatedness, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work like this. Cross-cultural wisdom, it's very, very hard to understand. So the best way to do it, the way how I try to incentivize people and create systems for Westerners, is to go to places and throw your hand up and say to another culture, give me an experience you deem worth having, and I promise you I try not to understand it, but I will take that blueprint, I bring it back to my culture, and I'm going to find culturally native systems from where I'm at, geographically where I live, and I try to recreate that blueprint, right? If you are willing to do that and explore, it becomes something very different. You will have an experience in the middle of the jungle that is going to be very different. You come back here and you're not going to try to drag that in, but you are taking upon yourself to develop something in our culture that gives you a similar sense of connectivity. That's how we evolve a culture forward. And if we all do that, then 500 years from now, people will look back and say, oh my goodness, how great it was that in 2025, there was a big group of people who were searching, finding an authentic native healing protocol that is connected to our big cities and so on and so forth, right? So it's not easy. It's not easy. Unfortunately, everyone is looking for the easy systems. And I understand, we are a lazy species. We are really not a very active species. I mean, as I said, and the reason I'm saying lazy, because we are very, our biomechanics are incredibly effective. So if you look at a chimpanzee that is genetically so close to us, they spent about 7 times more energy to go from A to B than a human being.
Because of how they're designed.
We are designer, all about efficiency. Everything about us is efficiency. So there's nothing wrong with searching for the simple solutions. But it's a duality. Right? The duality is the challenge of human existence, that yes, we are wired for easy way out, but you also need to understand it, what that means. So you also understand that, well, we need to also be able to understand complex systems, and we live in such a massive complex system that you got to dance there with that duality,
I mean, we need both ends of the spectrum, right? We need easy relaxation, and we need pain, discomfort, the edges of what you're capable of doing, what you're able to push yourself emotionally and physically, because you don't ever have you lose the appreciation for those wonderful.
It doesn't exist,
right?
That's the funny thing. What you said, that the spectrum has 2 ends to it. There's no spectrum without 2 ends. So it's right. So beauty, you can only understand because there's ugly.
Yeah.
There is no beauty without ugly. Then if you truly embrace that, then suddenly the ugly becomes not a negative. It is a part of the whole. And then you stop seeing it as something undesirable.
Something to be comfortable in, that discomfort.
Exactly. It's the part of it. You can't have self-confidence if you don't explore insecurity. It's a duality. And this is where we are kind of still in the exploratory phase as a society, as a culture. We are trying to mitigate that. We don't want insecure situation to show up for our kids because we believe it destroys their self-confidence.
Yeah.
But without exploring the insecurity, you don't have a shot to develop the self-confidence that is needed to lead like an authentic, robust life where you're comfortable with who you are, i.e. a boy or a girl or whatever gender, you are associated with, right? That's why it's so important to develop skills in life to understand biology and all that, because that will help you to understand everything in life better. Yeah. Most people who spend time with me, just a little bit of time, they will say that Csaba is a very spiritual person, right? But, and I love spirituality. I love this concept, whatever spirituality is. I don't think spirituality, psychology, and biology can be separated. We like to convenience sake separate it. And I think the convenience is because more emphasis you put on spirituality, the less you focus on biology. Oftentimes people tell me, I don't care about my physical body anymore, because I'm so spiritual. I'm like, that's an easy way out.
Any separation.
Yeah, right? So the reason I'm saying that, because yes, I care about spirituality, but I think your number one job as a conscious human individual, take good care of your biology. That's step one. You got to take care of the biology. That will potentiate that your psychology will be available to you. And then you can really explore the oneness, whatever oneness is. Oneness requires sensitivity. I remember the first time I participated in a deep ceremony with the hunter-gatherer tribe. I finished that ceremony, and this was in the middle of nowhere, and I came out and I was laughing so hard because I'm like, it was such a ridiculous concept, the separation between me and nature and me and the other people who surrounded me. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my goodness, the separation is the illusion. The oneness is reality. But it's very hard to get there when you can truly observe that, as opposed to just having it a concept, but having some sort of visceral understanding of the oneness. Yeah. Most people talk about oneness, one love, and all that. It's lovely. But what does that really mean? How's that practical? How can you make that into a tool? And that's why biology is so important, because I truly agree in the oneness. But if there's no tool that allow you to explore that, use it, then it's just a lovely concept that won't do much. But if you are able to focus on your biology, there will be tools and skills that you can bring into your everyday, let it be squatting, kneeling, dancing, what have you. And then it makes your biology operate better. And then actually it will potentiate that spiritual experience, let's say, So the whole thing is like this mumbo jumbo thing, right? And that's just talking about the individual alone. And then we bring in a relationship like yours and mine here, right? Most people think that learning and wisdom happens alone. I don't think it ever happens alone. We are not the type of species that learns alone. We are not a turtle that grows up alone. A turtle never sees daddy and mommy because they're dug down and then mommy is gone and then turtle comes up and they live alone. We are not that. We are very, very different. We are people who are only discovering learning and wisdom in relationships. First with your mother and your father, let's say, and then with your friends and your teachers, and then throughout life, hopefully a big network, right? Yeah. So these conversations are the only way to really deepen the wisdom, i.e., that surpasses your individual wisdom, my individual wisdom, but through the conversations, something new bubbles up. And that's what gets lost in shallow conversation, i.e. social media. It's impossible to go deep. But podcasts like this allows that, maybe, to show that there is a need for this. It is important. And I think what's interesting, if you live 20 years, if you're just a 20-year-old, right? 20 years is a long time. There's a lot of experiences that you already had. And if you're willing to spend the time in relationship and explore it, tremendous amount of wisdom can come out of a 20-year-old. But it needs to be explored. Earned experiences only count if you explore them and you make them into wisdom. And if you're able to do that 30, 40, and all that, you can become this incredible being with so many skills and wisdom in every facet of life. And that's an exciting way of existence, Unfortunately, it's hard to consumerize that. The reason I'm saying unfortunately, because if it would be easy to consumerize it, that's where the conversation would be. It wouldn't be about this easy clickbaits, right? But it would be about wisdom. Yeah. But wisdom is hard to consumerize, and but maybe that's also just a natural selective mechanism.
Yeah, there's a pain that people feel when they're not exposed to it, when they're not involved, cultivating that. And but I think most people are feeling that pain. They don't recognize that it's that. It is the lack of the human connection, the sharing of ideas, creativity that springs from it, the fulfillment of exercising the creativity after you learn something from somebody. You're right. It's difficult to consumerize, but when you're involved in it, as you're sharing with me right now, it's very natural. It's a very natural feeling. Yeah. Because we're designed.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of it. If you look at what speech evolved for originally, that's a big subject as well. But if you think about it, what is the reason for speech? And I used to think that, you can hunt better, right? It's not really true. Like hunter-gatherers, they don't really speak when they hunt. Do it differently. So I think speech evolved really to help social connections. It's like if you look at the group of chimpanzees, what do? They are looking through, fleas between each other's hair. But that type of stuff requires their hand, and they dig through and they eat that stuff out and bonds them as a society. Now, we humans, we managed to use our hands for so many different things. So our hands were kind of out of doing something else. But words and language allowed us to connect to each other. So talking about nonsense was important for humans because it bonded us potentially. Now, this is not something that necessarily true. It might be not. There are some groups of people who believe that that's why speech developed. Some people don't. I'm just giving you a very subjective opinion here. And that's, again, exploring an idea. So if speech is about social connection, then there is a couple of different layers to it. Because speech comes out of a certain way of using your brain, right? So for me, for example, going to you and say, hey, Todd, how are you doing? What's going on? And you say, oh, I'm doing good, busy, blah, 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 blah. There's an upside to that, weirdly enough. I'm coming from a language that's a very ancient language. Hungarian is one of the most difficult languages in the world that we know of today. But before I learned English, I was kind of fascinated with English. In Hungarian, you don't really say to people, hey, how are you? What's going on? How's the weather? Like, I remember first time I started learning English, I'm like, what? Why are you asking how they are? Why are you talking about the weather? I had a very hard time understanding what is there? Why? It's like, who cares about the weather? Look outside. That's the weather. I literally had a hard time with it. Now, I obviously speak English. Go back to Hungary, I have a hard time in Hungarian because I love in English that very casualness that you're able to insert through this chit-chat. In Hungarian, you kind of go deep too fast. In English, we are great at chit-chatting. But oftentimes we don't go deep, and not always. But so what I'm trying to say, there's a power to chit-chats and these very surface conversations. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it helps us to bond. But then there's also the capability of go deep and explore those ideas. And as we go in deep, what bubbles up is the wisdom. So going broad with chit-chat and going deep with deep conversations, I think it's both very important to explore.
So interesting. I need to wrap this up.
Yes.
If our listeners want to find out more about you, where can they find it?
I'm really not that much online. I do have a website. It doesn't really talk too much about any of my ventures that I'm involved with. But we have 240 episodes of a YouTube series we created one year because I wanted to sort of put out some non-consumer system that people who were interested about what would Csaba think about, what would be important to explore as a human being to better their lives. I was like, the best I was able to come up with, well, why don't I create this free service of just free YouTube episodes talking about things which I think worth thinking about and exploring. Now, obviously, these are 5 to 10 minute episodes. They're not deep, but the idea is that if you watch this, you can talk to your spouse, your friends about it, and maybe you guys can go deep down on it. I touch on singing, boxing, violence, social cohesiveness, to all kinds of different things. So 240 episodes in 1 year. Took some effort, but so it's out there.
And what's your YouTube channel?
It's my name, basically, Csaba Lucas.
Okay, so CSABA.
Yes, exactly.
UCAS.
That's right, brother.
Yeah. Thank you so
Todd,
much.
thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Like today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can find us at stark.health. That's stark.health.